Thank you for joining with me in Ken Wapnick's journey through the text of A Course in Miracles. This is by the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, and of course it's Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. We are on Chapter 2, The Separation and the Atonement. The whole process of correction becomes nothing more than a series of pragmatic steps in the larger process of accepting the atonement as the remedy. These steps may be summarized in this way. Know first that this is fear. Fear arises from lack of love. The only remedy for lack of love is perfect love. Perfect love is the atonement. Though rather primitive in its statement relative to the more sophisticated treatments of the process later on, the above paragraph outlines the practice of forgiveness, or how we are healed of pain. We recognize first that the problem is not external but internal. Our experience of conflict in the body is the projection of the mind's fear. We then recognize that the fear comes from a decision to reject love, and its undoing comes from correcting our mistake by choosing love instead of fear. Once the right choice is made, the fear and conflict disappear, and all that remains is the love we both have and are. Thus the atonement or process of undoing is made complete. Needless to say, this process works for any discomfort, pain, or anxiety, all of which come from our decision not to love. This means we have chosen the ego and banished from awareness the voice that speaks for atonement. In this way, Jesus has set forth the framework for the rest of his symphony. Everyone experiences fear, yet it would take very little right thinking to realize why fear occurs. Few appreciate the real power of the mind, and no one remains fully aware of it all the time. The only one with this awareness is someone in the real world. Jesus, for example, whose mind is totally healed. As he tells us in the manual, examples of this healed state are so rare it does not pay to even speak about them. His point here, however, is that few appreciate the power of the mind, specifically that its misdirected power is the cause of all fear. If we wish to be without fear or any source of discomfort, we need to acknowledge the mind's power to choose. Jesus continues, however, if you hope to spare yourself from fear, there are some things you must realize and realize fully. The mind is very powerful and never loses its creative force. It never sleeps. Every instant it is creating. It is hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. Again, Jesus is not using creating as he typically does in the Course, but in the sense of the split mind's power to identify with love's creating, or the ego's miscreating. Either way, the mind literally makes the world we see and live in. He urges us not to minimize its power. No theme in A Course in Miracles is more important. It appears at first glance that to believe such power about yourself is arrogant, but that is not the real reason you do not believe it. You prefer to believe that your thoughts cannot exert real influence because you are actually afraid of them. This may ally awareness of the guilt, but at the cost of perceiving the mind as impotent. People will frequently say, "What difference does it make what I think?" Helen continually fell prey to this mistake, which is why this passage is here. Her behavior in many ways was impeccable. She was one of the most socially appropriate people you would ever want to meet. yet her thoughts were frequently quite different. She was always concerned about her weight, for example. When she was much younger, she would gain tremendous amounts of weight, take it off, put it back on, take it off, etc. In fact, once she ended up in the hospital seriously ill because of that cycle. In the years that I knew her, however, she was certainly not overweight, even though weight consumed her thoughts. I used to tell her that she was the fattest thin person I had ever met. If you sat down at a meal with Helen, there would be a tacit moment of silence. She was not saying grace, but counting the calories of what she was about to eat. Indeed, her mind was a walking calculator, and yet she did not think it mattered if she was always thinking fat, as long as she did not eat fat. Yet her mind's basic problem of self-hatred or guilt remained. On another level, with the exception of the very few she felt comfortable with, Helen hated to be with people, even though she would be nice to them. And if she did not actually hate them, she certainly was filled with judgment. This is another example of the thinking Jesus addresses. As long as I don't tell you what I think about you, it's all right, and then I won't feel guilty. Jesus is telling Helen that this does not work. Guilt does not come from what we say or do, but from what we think. When politicians lie, and they all lie, and we know they do, as everyone does, they think it is fine because no one knows. However, the truth is that the guilt is present when we know we are not telling the truth. We may pay heavily for this type of thinking. This may allay awareness of the guilt, but at the cost of perceiving the mind as impotent. If Jesus believed in sin, this would be it, because if we fail to understand, accept, and respect the mind's power, there is no hope of ever being free of the dream. That was Christianity's huge mistake, for it quickly became a religion of magic. We will return to this theme in Chapter 3. The point here is that it is the ego's fear of the mind's power to choose that leads us to deny its power and render it impotent, preserving beyond correction the original decision for the ego. Another source of this fear, though not discussed here, is that the ego tells us to avoid the mind because if we gain access to it, we will only misuse our power and sin again. Having first made sin real, the ego counsels us to avoid it like the plague, which our guilt convinces us is so. I am going to stop right there. I thank you so much for joining with me. I hope that you have a most beautiful day. I'm quite enjoying this Ken Wapnick, and I hope you are too. And I will see you tomorrow. Thank you. I love you.